The royal guard stood motionless, his eyes locked straight ahead, a pillar of discipline and honor. But when Ethan, a cocky tourist, reached out and stole a ceremonial medal from his uniform, the air crackled with tension. The crowd gasped. Had he really just done that? Ethan laughed, waving the stolen medal like a trophy, mocking centuries of tradition. He thought the guard wouldn't react. He was dead wrong. In a single, swift motion, the silent sentinel delivered a response so ruthless, so precise, that the entire crowd stood frozen in shock. What happened next left everyone speechless, and Ethan humiliated beyond belief. Before we dive in, buckle up, get ready, and hit that subscribe button for a special surprise tomorrow. The sun hung high over the grand palace, its golden rays bouncing off the pristine marble walls and casting sharp shadows along the courtyard. Tourists bustled around, cameras flashing, voices chattering, the rhythmic sound of footsteps echoing against the cobblestones. But amid the movement, the royal guard stood still, an unshaken monolith of discipline and tradition. His red uniform was crisp, his boots polished to a mirror sheen, and on his chest, a row of gleaming medals reflected the shifting light. His face, blank and impassive, betrayed no emotion, no distraction, just unwavering focus. People whispered as they walked by, some with respect, others with playful curiosity. The legend of the royal guards was well known. They were trained never to react, no matter what happened, no matter the taunts, the jokes, or the ridiculous antics of tourists hoping to break their legendary composure. They remained still, a symbol of the monarchy, of discipline, of tradition unshaken by the passing tides of modern irreverence. Among the crowd was Ethan, an American tourist dressed in a designer jacket, sunglasses perched cockily on his nose, his phone always within reach, ready to capture whatever he deemed worthy of his followers. He smirked as he nudged his friend Liam, motioning toward the guard. "Bro, watch this," Ethan chuckled. "These guys are like statues. I bet I can make him crack." Liam snorted. "Dude, don't. You'll just embarrass yourself." But Ethan was already moving, weaving through the crowd, his confidence swelling as the tourists parted slightly, some stepping aside, sensing trouble. He strutted forward, standing just inches from the guard, tilting his head in mock fascination. "You alive in there, buddy?" Ethan grinned, waving a hand in front of the guard's face. No response, no flicker of recognition. The guard remained as still as a carving in stone. The people nearby grew silent, watching, some with amused smiles, others shaking their heads. Ethan wasn't deterred. He leaned in closer, scrutinizing the guard's uniform. "Man, look at these medals. You must be real proud, huh?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "I wonder if they're even real." Still, no reaction. The guard remained locked in place, his focus trained straight ahead. Ethan grinned wider. This was too easy. "Oh, come on," he taunted. "You really don't move at all, huh? Guess that means you won't mind if I just..." And then, in one swift motion, Ethan's fingers curled around a gleaming medal on the guard's chest, tugging it free. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. The murmurs turned to hushed tension. For the first time, a shift occurred, not from the guard, but in the air itself. A weight settled over the courtyard, a sudden suffocating stillness that made every spectator freeze in place. Ethan held the medal up between two fingers, spinning it lazily. He laughed. And yet, the guard did not move. Ethan twirled the stolen medal between his fingers, his grin widening as he turned to his friends. "Seriously? Nothing. I thought these guys were supposed to be all about their fancy traditions." He waved the medal in the air like a cheap souvenir, basking in the attention. Some people in the crowd laughed nervously, unsure whether to be amused or horrified. Others muttered among themselves, shaking their heads. But the guard did not move. The thick silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the very air had frozen in place. The usual chatter of the crowd faded. Even the faint rustling of camera shutters seemed distant, drowned beneath the heavy weight of anticipation. Every tourist watching knew that this was more than just a prank. Ethan had crossed an invisible line, one woven into the very fabric of tradition, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Yet Ethan remained oblivious. He turned back to the guard, tilting his head. "Come on, man. At least blink or something. You're really just gonna stand there and let me take this?" He chuckled, shaking his head as if the situation were ridiculous. He had expected some kind of reaction, an annoyed glance, maybe a warning, but instead holding up the medal to examine it in the sunlight. "I mean, look at this thing," he scoffed. "Do they just hand these out for standing still all day?" Then, without warning, the guard moved. It was not the hesitant, clumsy reaction of a man who had been caught off guard. It was not anger, not flinching, not even hesitation. It was precise, controlled, like a machine executing a programmed response with perfect efficiency. In a single fluid motion, the guard took one step forward, his polished boot striking the ground with sharp finality. The sound of impact echoed through the courtyard, snapping the tension like a whip. Ethan barely had time to register what had happened before the guard's gloved hand snatched his wrist with an iron grip. The force of it was shocking, unyielding, yet not wild. The medal slipped from Ethan's fingers, clinking against the cobblestones as the guard squeezed, just enough to make it clear that this was not a game. Ethan's grin vanished. His breath caught in his throat. The crowd reacted instantly. Some gasped, others instinctively stepped back, phones shooting up to record what was happening. The guard, still holding Ethan's wrist, straightened to his full, imposing height. His face remained expressionless, but when he spoke, his voice was deep, unshaken, filled with the weight of authority. "Step back, now." The command was simple. It was not a threat, not a plea. It was an order. Ethan's confidence drained from his face. He tried to pull away, but the grip remained firm. For the first time, he realized he had made a mistake. Ethan's breath hitched as the reality of the situation sank in. The guard's grip was firm, unyielding, like steel clamped around his wrist. His heart pounded in his chest, but he tried to play it off, forcing an uneasy chuckle. "Hey man, chill. It was just a joke." He gave a weak tug, but the guard didn't budge. The tourists around them watched in stunned silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on the courtyard. More phones were lifted, capturing every second of the unfolding scene. The energy in the air had shifted. It was no longer just a spectacle, but something far more intense. Some in the crowd smirked, recognizing the poetic justice of the moment. Others whispered among themselves, sensing that Ethan was in far deeper than he had anticipated. Liam stepped forward hesitantly. "Dude, just let go of the medal," he urged. His voice, usually filled with the same arrogance as Ethan's, now wavered with uncertainty. But the medal was already gone, lying untouched on the stone pavement, gleaming under the sunlight. It was no longer about the object itself. It was about what had been done. A line had been crossed, and the guard was ensuring it would not be ignored. Ethan's forced grin faltered. All right, I get it," he muttered, his voice losing its bravado. "No need to make a scene." The guard didn't move, didn't acknowledge the attempt to downplay the situation. His face remained as stoic as ever, but his presence alone carried the weight of generations of discipline, of duty that could not be mocked or challenged. His silence was more powerful than any words could be. Ethan swallowed hard. He could feel the heat of 1,000 eyes on him, could hear the murmurs growing louder. He wasn't the one in control anymore. The joke had turned against him, and he knew it. Desperation flickered in his eyes as he tried to step back again, but the guard's grip held firm. Not hurting, not cruel, just unwavering. He locked eyes with Ethan, the way a storm looms over an unsuspecting traveler. Then, as suddenly as he had acted, the guard released him. Ethan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. His wrist tingled where the guard's hand had been a reminder that this was not something he could simply laugh off. The crowd remained silent for a moment longer. Then, as if a spell had been broken, whispers and hushed voices filled the space once more. But this time, they weren't laughing. They were watching Ethan with something different: judgment, disappointment, even disgust. What had started as a game had now become a moment of humiliation, one that was being documented in real time. Ethan's stomach twisted as he realized the truth. He wasn't the one putting on a show anymore. He was the show. Ethan stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. The laughter, the arrogance, the smug confidence, all of it had drained from his face, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time: embarrassment. The crowd didn't cheer, they didn't mock, they didn't even jeer. Instead, they stared at him, eyes filled with silent judgment. Their expressions carried something far worse than ridicule: disapproval. He could hear the quiet murmurs around him, hushed voices whispering among themselves. What an idiot! Disrespectful. His face burned as he took a shaky step back, rubbing his wrist where the guard had held him. He forced a chuckle, trying to mask the unease creeping up his spine. All right, no harm done, right? His voice was uneven, a poor imitation of his usual cocky tone. No one responded. His stomach twisted as he saw phones still pointed at him. He wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. This wasn't a funny prank or a viral joke. He was the joke. Liam stepped in beside him, his face tight with discomfort. "Dude, let's just go," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the silent crowd. Ethan wanted to agree, to just turn around and pretend none of this had happened. But before he could move, the sound of heavy boots against stone cut through the murmurs. Two uniformed palace security officers strode toward them, their expressions unreadable, but their presence commanding. The crowd parted instinctively, giving them a clear path. Ethan's throat went dry. One of the officers, a man with sharp eyes and a posture just as disciplined as the guard, stopped in front of him. He didn't have to raise his voice to make it clear that he was in charge. "Return the medal," he said evenly. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His brain scrambled for a way out, some excuse, some way to downplay everything. But there was no getting out of this. The guard's unwavering silence, the judgment from the crowd, the presence of security, it was all pressing in on him like a slow, crushing weight. Liam bent down quickly, snatching up the fallen medal and holding it out. Here, man. No big deal, right?" His voice was tight, nervous. The security officer took the medal without looking at him. Instead, he turned to the guard. With precise, almost reverent movements, he returned the medal to its rightful place on the uniform, pressing it firmly against the red fabric before stepping back. The guard didn't react, didn't even glance down. He simply remained, as he always had been, unshaken, unmoved, a sentinel of tradition. Ethan felt something sink in his chest. He hadn't just messed up, he had disrespected something greater than himself. And now everyone knew it. Ethan could feel the sweat forming on the back of his neck as the security officer took a step closer. His cocky smirk was gone, replaced by something uncertain, something unfamiliar. His stomach twisted with a sinking feeling he couldn't shake. "You think this is funny?" The officer's voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a question. Ethan swallowed hard. "Look, I didn't mean—" The officer cut him off with a small shake of his head. "No, you meant to do exactly what you did." His eyes, sharp and unwavering, bore into Ethan like a knife, slicing through every excuse he was about to make. "You disrespected the guard. You disrespected this place." Ethan felt a fresh wave of eyes on him, the weight of their judgment pressing in from all sides. The murmurs in the crowd had stopped now. They were waiting, watching. Liam shifted, uncomfortably beside him. "Come on, man, he gets it. It was just a joke?" The officer's gaze snapped to Liam, and his voice stayed steady, firm. "Do you see anyone laughing?" Liam's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ethan felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't know what to do, what to say. His whole life, he'd been able to talk his way out of things, smooth over any trouble with a joke, a grin, a well-placed excuse. But now, standing in the middle of that silent, judging crowd, with the presence of the guard looming beside him, he had nothing. The officer exhaled sharply, as if Ethan's stupidity physically exhausted him. "Leave, now!" Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He turned sharply, shoving his hands into his pockets, moving through the crowd as quickly as he could. He could feel the stares burning into his back, the heat of shame crawling up his neck. Every step felt heavier, the weight of what he'd done settling in his chest like a stone. Liam followed closely, muttering under his breath. Dude, that was bad. Like, really bad. Ethan ignored him. He just needed to get away. Away from the crowd, away from the guard, away from the sick feeling curling in his stomach. As he pushed past the last few onlookers, a voice caught his ear. Soft, but pointed. Disrespect comes back around. Ethan turned his head slightly, just enough to see an older man watching. Him from the edge of the crowd. His face wasn't angry, it wasn't amused, it was disappointed. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't know how to. He just kept walking. But as he did, he caught sight of something. Phones still recording. People typing furiously. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't over. This was the palace grounds. His fists clenched so tightly in his pockets that his nails dug into his palms. His mind raced, his heart pounded, and his stomach twisted into knots. He could still feel the weight of the guard's grip. On his wrist, still hear the silence of the crowd, the sheer finality of it all. But none of that compared to the realization that hit him like a freight train. He had been recorded. Liam jogged up beside him, glancing around nervously. Dude, this is bad. Like, really bad. Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. His jaw was locked so tight it felt like his teeth might crack. Liam ran a hand through his hair, muttering, "I mean, you saw all those phones, right? People were filming everything." Ethan kept walking. Faster now, but the panic clawing up his throat wasn't something he could outrun. His mind flooded with worst-case scenarios, videos spreading like wildfire, headlines calling him out, his name becoming synonymous with disrespect and humiliation. And then, as if the universe wanted to mock him, his phone buzzed. He yanked it. Out of his pocket, dread pooling in his gut. The screen lit up with notifications, messages, tags, alerts. He swallowed hard and tapped on a notification. The first thing he saw was a video of himself, frozen mid-laugh, the medal dangling between his fingers. The caption underneath made his stomach drop. Arrogant tourist steals Royal Guards medal. Instantly. Regrets it. His hands went clammy. He scrolled down. More videos, more captions. When stupidity meets discipline. Disrespectful tourist gets what he deserves. Watch. This Royal Guard's response is absolutely ruthless. The comment sections were even worse. Thousands of replies, pouring in by the second. Some called him a clown, an embarrassment. Others said he deserved worse. Some just laughed at him. Liam leaned over his shoulder, letting out a low whistle. Wow, that's already got 1 million views. Ethan felt like he was going to be sick. His entire world had just flipped upside down. Just hours ago, he had been in control, the center of attention, the guy who made people laugh, who did whatever he wanted for the sake of content. Now he was a joke, a walking, viral example of what not to do. A pit formed in his stomach as he realized something even worse. This wasn't going to go away. By the time he got back to his hotel, by the time he even tried to figure out how to fix this, it would already be everywhere. The moment he had mocked a tradition older than himself, had thought he could get away with it. The world had seen it, and the world wouldn't forget. Ethan sat stiffly in the back of the cab, his phone gripped so tightly in his hand that his knuckles turned white. The ride back to the hotel was a blur. City streets flashing by, people going about their day, completely unaware that his world was collapsing around him. He barely registered Liam beside him, scrolling through his own phone, his expression shifting between shock and amusement. "Dude," Liam muttered, shaking his head. "This is insane. Every account is reposting it. You're on like every trending page right now." Ethan said nothing. He just kept staring at the screen, watching his name explode across social media. He tapped into another video, heart hammering against his ribs. There he was, grinning like an idiot, waving the medal in the air. The crowd's reaction, the guard's ruthless response, the way Ethan's entire demeanor cracked the moment he lost control, it was all captured in perfect, unforgiving clarity. He scrolled through the comments. This guy just disrespected an entire culture. No sympathy. Imagine thinking you can mess with a royal guard and not suffer the consequences. The internet never forgets. R.I.P. this dude's reputation. Ethan's stomach twisted. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He was watching himself lose everything in real time. Liam snorted. Man, some people are really tearing into you. Ultimate entitled tourist moment. That one's got like 50,000 likes. Already, Ethan's grip tightened around his phone. Shut up, Liam blinked. Whoa, chill, man, I'm just saying. I said shut up. His voice came out harsher than he intended, but he didn't care. His pulse was pounding in his ears. Liam held up his hands. All right, but, you might want to figure out what you're gonna say about this, 'cause right now, it's looking real bad. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed again. A new notification. Incoming call. Manager. His stomach sank even lower. Of course, his brand deals, his sponsorships, everything was built on his image. And right now, his image was that of an entitled fool who had publicly humiliated himself in front of millions. He hesitated, staring at the screen, but he already knew what was coming. He let the call go to voicemail. He wasn't ready to hear the words he already knew, and Ethan shoved the door open, stepping out before the driver could even put the car in park. He needed space, needed air, needed a second to think before the entire world swallowed him whole. But as he stepped into the lobby, his worst nightmare became reality. People were staring, not just staring, recognizing. A group of tourists whispered among themselves. A man near the counter pulled out his phone. A teenager near the elevator smirked. They knew Ethan had gone viral, and there was nowhere left to hide. Ethan kept his head down as he pushed through the hotel lobby, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could feel their eyes on him. Whispers following his every step, the subtle clicks of phones being raised, cameras rolling. His stomach twisted into knots. Just hours ago, he had been another tourist, moving unnoticed through the crowd. Now, he was the tourist, the fool, the viral sensation that everyone had an opinion on. He reached the elevator and jabbed the button, bouncing on his heels, willing the doors to open faster. The murmur of voices behind him was growing louder. Is that him? No way, that's definitely him. Dude, check the video. Same jacket, same sunglasses. Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to keep his face neutral. If he reacted, if he acknowledged them, it would only get worse. The doors finally slid open, and he stepped inside, slamming the button for his floor. Just before the doors shut, a teenage boy shoved his foot between them, stopping them from closing. Ethan's breath caught as the kid stepped in. A smug grin stretched across his face. Yo, bro, he said, pulling out his phone. Mind saying something for the video, maybe an apology? Ethan's blood boiled. Get lost. The kid's grin widened. Oof, no remorse? That's gonna make this even better. He lifted his phone higher, angling it directly at Ethan's face. Ethan snapped. He lunged forward and smacked the phone out of the kid's hand, sending it clattering to the floor. The elevator went dead silent. The kid stared at his fallen phone, then back at Ethan, his grin vanishing. Wow, he muttered, shaking his head. You really don't learn, huh? The doors slid open to Ethan's floor, and without another word, he stormed out. He didn't wait for a response, didn't turn back to see if the kid picked up his phone. He just needed to get away. The second he reached his hotel room, he slammed the door shut and locked it. His chest heaved as he pressed his back against the door, squeezing his eyes shut. It was spiraling out of control. His phone buzzed again. He didn't want to check, but he couldn't help himself. When he unlocked the screen, his stomach dropped. Elevator incident was already online, entitled Tourist Snaps at Fan, Makes Everything Worse. Ethan stared at the video, his hands shaking. He had lost control of the narrative. Every move he made, every reaction, was being picked apart and fed into the endless machine of the internet. This wasn't just a moment anymore. This was who he was now, and the world was never going to let him forget it. Ethan sat on the edge of the hotel bed, his phone heavy in his hands, his mind racing. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in, suffocating him under the weight of what he had done. Hours ago, he had been laughing, riding high on the thrill of pushing limits. Now, his name was everywhere, and not in the way he had ever wanted. He scrolled through his notifications, dread twisting his stomach with every new post, every fresh comment. The internet was ripping him apart. You can hear the moment he realizes he's not in control anymore. Imagine thinking this was a good idea. Entitled, disrespectful, and now aggressive. Yikes. Every second, the views climbed higher. Every post only fueled the fire. He had built his whole life around attention, and now it was devouring him. His phone buzzed with another call. His manager, again. Ethan knew what was coming, but this time he couldn't avoid it. He exhaled sharply and answered, "What the hell did you do?" The voice on the other end was sharp, laced with controlled fury. Ethan swallowed. No, don't talk. Just listen." His manager's voice was clipped, measured, the kind of calm that made Ethan's skin prickle. "Do you have any idea how bad this is? Your sponsorships gone, your partnerships canceled. Brands don't want their names anywhere near you right now." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "I can fix this," he muttered. "You can't," his manager snapped. "This isn't just one mistake. You doubled down. The video of you snapping at that kid in the elevator, it's making things even worse." Ethan felt his pulse spike. "That kid was filming me like I was some kind of zoo animal." His manager exhaled sharply. "And you gave them exactly what they wanted. Now, you're not just the disrespectful tourist. You're the guy who lost it on a fan." Ethan's head dropped into his hand, stretched between them. What do I do? When his manager finally spoke again, the anger had cooled, but the disappointment cut even deeper. "You disappear." Ethan's breath hitched. No posts, no statements, no damage control. You lay low, and you pray that people move on, because right now, you're radioactive. Ethan clenched his jaw. "And if they don't move on," another pause. Then, with quiet finality, his manager said, "Then you live with it." The call ended. Ethan stared at his reflection in the dark screen of his phone. For the first time in his life, there was no way out. No joke, no smooth talk, no quick fix. He had made himself a spectacle, and now he was paying the price. Ethan lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of his phone screen casting a dim light across the room. The notifications hadn't stopped. Every time he shut his eyes, the sound of a new mention, a new tag, a new viral post pierced the silence. The internet was relentless. He had spent years curating his image, the fun guy, the prankster, the entertainer. Now, that image had been ripped from his hands and replaced with something else, a lesson, a cautionary tale. The comments had shifted. At first they had mocked him, laughing at his humiliation, but now they were worse. This guy is the perfect example of why people hate influencers. Disrespecting a centuries-old tradition for clout and failing poetic justice. No apology, just hiding like a coward. Typical. Ethan shut his eyes, but the words were burned into his mind. No matter where he turned, the world had already decided who he was. He thought about posting something, a statement, an apology, anything, but the moment he even considered it, he could already hear the backlash. Too little. Too late. They wouldn't believe him. They wouldn't forgive. A sharp knock at the door made him jolt upright. His pulse spiked. Was it hotel security? Reporters? He hesitated before forcing himself to his feet and pulling the door open. Liam stood on the other side, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Ethan exhaled sharply. "What do you want?" Liam stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, letting the door shut behind him. "You need to face this," Ethan scoffed, dragging a hand down his face. "Face what exactly? The fact that the entire world thinks I'm a joke? That my career just burned to the ground overnight?" Liam didn't flinch. "You did that to yourself." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Wow, thanks for the support." Liam shook his head. "I'm not here to make you feel better, man. I'm here because you need to hear this. You messed up. Bad. And instead of owning it, you're just hiding, hoping it all goes away." Ethan clenched his jaw. "That's what my manager told me to do." Liam let out a bitter laugh. Yeah? Well, your manager doesn't have to walk around while people whisper your name like it's a curse. I do. You know what people are saying? Ethan didn't answer. They're not just mad at you, Ethan. They hate you. And it's not because of the prank. It's because you're acting like none of this is your fault. Silence. Liam shook his head, backing toward the door. You can keep sitting in here, watching your name get dragged through the dirt, or you can own up to it and try to fix it. But that's on you. The door clicked shut behind him. Ethan was alone again. And for the first time, he realized he had no idea how to fix this. Ethan sat in the dim hotel room, his thoughts a tangled mess. The walls felt like they were closing in, the glow of his phone screen casting eerie shadows across his face. The weight of Liam's words lingered, heavier than the silence surrounding him. They hate you. The truth of it gnawed at him. This wasn't just another scandal that would fade in a few days. This was who he was now, not just to the internet, but to the world. His name wasn't just trending, it had become a warning, a cautionary tale of what happened when you disrespected something bigger than yourself. His mind replayed the moment over and over, the smug confidence, the laughter, the stolen medal gleaming between his fingers, the way the crowd had shifted, how quickly the air had turned cold, and then the guard's grip, unyielding, powerful, discipline incarnate. The sheer finality of that moment haunted him. He had been so sure that the world revolved around him, that he could do anything, say anything, and people would laugh it off like they always had. But now there was no laughter. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the small space, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had to do something, anything. He couldn't just sit here while the world tore him apart. His fingers hovered over his phone. He thought about posting an apology, a real one. No excuses, no justifications, just an honest acknowledgement of what he had done. But before he could even type a single word, a new notification popped up on his screen. He tapped it instinctively, and a video began to play. It wasn't of him he had humiliated. It was of the guard. The same guard who had remained stone-faced, unwavering, unshaken. The video showed him standing at his post, still, composed, his uniform pristine despite the events of the day. Tourists passed by, whispering, pointing, watching him with a new sense of reverence. Then, something small but significant happened. A young boy, no older than 8 or 9, walked up to the guard. Unlike Ethan, he didn't mock or taunt. Instead, he stood at attention and raised his hand in a crisp salute. The guard, as expected, didn't react. But the moment was powerful. The boy held the salute for several seconds before finally lowering his hand and stepping back, looking up at the silent figure with admiration. The caption beneath the video read, "Respect is earned." Some understand that. Others have to learn it the hard way. Ethan's throat tightened. His chest felt like it was caving in. This wasn't just about him. It never had been. He had made a mockery of something that people respected, and no amount of deleting posts or hiding away would erase what he had done. For the first time since it had all begun, Ethan felt ashamed. Ethan stood in the middle of his hotel room, staring at the video on his phone, his reflection flickering. In the dark screen, his chest felt tight, his stomach knotted with something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Genuine regret. This wasn't just about a viral moment. It wasn't about losing followers, sponsorships, or his reputation. It wasn't even about the guard. It was about respect. He had spent his whole life treating the world like it was his playground, bending rules, pushing limits, all for the sake of attention. He never stopped to think about why things were the way they were. Never considered the meaning behind traditions, the weight of discipline, the importance of something bigger than himself. And now, standing there alone, with nothing left but the wreckage of his own arrogance, it finally hit him. He had been wrong. For the first time in days, he wasn't thinking about damage control. He wasn't thinking about what the internet wanted or how to fix his brand. He was thinking about the people he had disrespected. He was thinking about the guard. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his jacket and his phone and walked out the door. The palace looked different at night. The crowd was smaller, the air quieter, cooler, but the guard was still there, unmoving, unshaken. Ethan felt something tighten in his throat as he approached, his footsteps light against the stone pavement. A few tourists glanced at him, whispering, recognizing him, but he ignored them. This wasn't about them. He stopped a few feet away from the guard. He didn't speak. He knew it wouldn't matter if he did. Instead, he took a deep breath and did the only thing that felt right. He stood up straight and he saluted. The same way the little boy had, the same way he should have from the beginning. The guard didn't react. Of course he didn't. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about expecting forgiveness or undoing what had already been done. It was about showing respect, even if it came late. Ethan held the salute for several seconds before finally dropping his hand. He exhaled, feeling something loosen in his chest. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The next morning, when Ethan woke up, his phone was still buzzing. But this time it wasn't just hate. A new video had surfaced. Someone had recorded him standing before the guard, saluting in silence before walking away into the night. The caption? Maybe he finally understands. The comments weren't all forgiving. Some still mocked him. Some called it an act. But others said, "This is how you make things right." And for the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't looking for the next viral moment. He was just grateful for the lesson.